Hey team, Lawrence here. Welcome back to another AIRTOC demo. In this lesson, we're going to revisit a deliverable that you may have encountered early in the planning phase, the Raci matrix. But there's a reason why we're going over it in monitoring and controlling. Let's take a look. Now, some of you may be wondering why we're covering a planning deliverable in the monitoring and controlling module, but there's a reason for this. In planning, the Raci sets the stage for who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed for every project deliverable or task. Now, when you enter execution, the plan may be a little bit different. You may have more resources or less. The responsibilities will change for members of the project team, and this requires an update. At this point, our focus needs to switch from building the Raci to maintenance of the Raci, which means that it needs to be updated and referred to frequently as a governance tool to manage accountability across the team. Any changes in the overarching factors of responsibility, accountability, consultation, or informed parties must be updated in the Raci itself. In this video, we'll cover what the Raci matrix becomes during monitoring and controlling, why it must be updated throughout the project lifecycle, how it's used to manage performance, escalation, and decision-making, and finally, we'll go through a live AIRTOC demo showing you how to update a Raci matrix using the Aimpm Project Management Coach. Let's get started. So first, let's begin with PMI's definition. PMI defines a Raci as a type of responsibility assignment matrix, a RAM, that specifies the roles and involvement of stakeholders in project activities using 4 classifications. Responsible, the person or group responsible for performing the task or executing the work. Accountable, the individual ultimately answerable for the success or failure of the task. This role holds final authority and ensures work is completed. Consulted, stakeholders or subject matter experts whose input and feedback are sought during the task or decision-making process. And lastly, informed. Individuals or groups who need to be kept informed about progress, decisions, or results, but are not actively involved in the execution of the work. This is the industry standard definition for a Raci, so let's move forward into how the Raci actually evolves over time. Here's the primary point. When we define Raci, PMI's definition applies, but there's a major part that we want to emphasize. The Raci is a living document. In planning, the Raci matrix is created to define the roles and responsibilities for each deliverable and major task that happens on your project. But in monitoring and controlling, the Raci becomes something a bit different. It becomes a living governance tool. During your project execution, your responsibilities may shift. New tasks will pop up. Ownership and leadership may actually change. Stakeholders may actually change roles, or their availability may dry up. There's a lot of different things that can happen with the resources on your project team. In fact, the longer the project, the greater the chance that one of these things may actually happen. And because of this, the Raci matrix must be actively reviewed and updated to ensure that accountability remains clear throughout the entire life cycle of the project, no matter what happens to your stakeholders. Always remember this. A static Raci is always a risk. A living Raci is a control mechanism. Use it appropriately. Updating the Raci matrix during monitoring and controlling is critical because it prevents confusion about who owns what over time. It eliminates responsibility conflicts. It supports accurate task assignments over time. It clarifies the roles during escalations. It strengthens stakeholder communication and ensures no deliverable is unassigned. It reduces bottlenecks caused by unclear ownership, and it documents changes in authority or responsibility. When a Raci is outdated, the team ends up pointing fingers. When a Raci is maintained, the team stays aligned and accountable to what you need them to get done. If a new dependency arises, the Raci must reflect the new responsible or accountable party. If a risk escalates, the Raci tells us who must act immediately. If a team member leaves, the Raci clarifies who steps into the role. If stakeholders increase or reduce involvement, the Raci must reflect the new engagement models. This is why the Raci matrix is not just a planning tool. It's a monitoring and controlling tool throughout the life cycle of your project that you can use to keep things on track and people aligned to their work. During monitoring and controlling, project managers should use the Raci matrix consistently. The funnel represents how it evolves from planning into execution and monitoring and controlling phases. So, for example, if you're able to make appropriate updates, this keeps the entire team aligned to their roles and responsibilities. This helps with communication because you have a clear understanding of who needs to know what, who's accountable for decisions, and who to escalate to if things get tough. The Raci can be viewed as a communication map if you know how to use it properly. If you communicate well, you can execute, monitor, and control the project well. Good execution hinges on a few things, and an accurate Raci is one of them. Now that we've covered how the Raci matrix functions in monitoring and controlling, let's walk through how to update the Raci matrix using the AIRTOC framework and the Aimpm project management coach. I'm going to switch over to the live demo so we can build the prompt together. Let's go. Okay, folks, before we dive into the Raci demonstration, there's a few things that we want to make sure you're aware of. Number one, for the sake of time and simplicity, we'll be using simulated minimal data. In real projects, you will most likely have a lot more context to add into your prompt. Number two, even with simplified data, you'll still see how powerful AIRTOC prompts can be. But remember, the more context you add, the better the output. And number three, this process applies to every AIRTOC template in the textbook. The workflow is universal and repeatable across all deliverables. Let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so as always, we like to give an overview of what the demonstration consists of before we jump in. So first, you're going to see your AIRTOC template for the Raci matrix here. All of the standard pieces apply. You have your AIRTOC framework to the left and your data on the right. Below that, we have a real-world scenario that we're going to use to actually refine our Raci. This scenario will feed logic into our actual prompt here that we're going to use, but there's one more piece that we have here, which is the actual Raci. So the entire objective for us within this demonstration is to update this Raci. Now, if I were to take a look at this as a project manager, there's tons of different gaps here that I need to fulfill. And sometimes your Raci may look like this because you don't really have a clear understanding of who's doing what at what time. So for example, for requirements finalization, the PM isn't really assigned, but the BA is responsible, right? Your TA is consulted and your CCB is informed. But where does ops, finance, and VL come in? We want to make sure that we're completing the Raci table because then that leaves no ambiguity around these tasks that we need to complete. So every once in a while, you may have a Raci that looks like this. The entire objective is to fix it. All right, so let's go back to the top here and talk about where we're going to start with the AIRTOC template. The framework remains the same. The AI platform, role, task, and output in your context is on the left-hand side. AI produces, again, is really just an example of what AI should produce for you once you submit your prompt. Okay, so let's start with the AI platform. Again, we recommend Gemini or ChatGPT for this query. The role is going to be a project manager or PMO manager. The task is draft and updated Raci matrix by reorganizing roles, responsibilities, and communication flows from project updates. The output is going to be a drafted, updated Raci matrix ready for validation. Our inputs here, again, is high-level information that may come from your project schedule or other sources. This includes your scope, your baseline problem and goal, your constraints, your risks, and your stakeholders. All right, after that, we have our data, which includes role data, tasks data, and governance data for this Raci matrix. Okay, and these are recommended items that you should put into your query to make sure that AI has the right context to draft out the proper output. Let's take a look at our scenario here. Our scenario says integration delays and the introduction of Tier 3 approval logic, CR014, cause several responsibilities to shift between the BA lead, technical architect, vendor lead, and finance SME. PMO governance reviews identified unclear accountability for UAT readiness, dashboard refinements, and data migration validation tasks. The vendor's lead role expanded due to technical troubleshooting needs, while finance SME availability decreased, creating ownership gaps in key deliverables. Governance required confirmation that all decision rights and escalation paths align with evolving workflows and CCB authority levels. The PM was instructed to produce an updated Raci matrix to reassign RACI roles, eliminate confusion, and ensure alignment across IT, operations, and vendor teams. Okay, so we have our assignment here. Let's move on. This is the prompt that we're going to use. All right, so for our AI platform and role, task, and output, these do not change. But at this point, we've added in some additional context and data, right? So for our inputs for context, the high-level data, we have our entire scope, we have our baseline problem and goal, we have our constraints, we have our risks, and our stakeholders added in. And all of this information, again, is contextual information that is taken from the scenario. We have to go out and gather a few more documents to make this accurate. Below that, we have our data inputs, which includes role data, task data, and governance data. And again, these are documents that you, again, may need to have to drag in to your prompt in order to make it fully contextual. But you'll see here you have updated responsibilities. So some of that information may be there. Finance, SME, reassigned to part-time, right? So you're just giving it a lot of context around all of the different things that happened around specific roles. Then the task data, right? Deliverables include integration fixes, tier 3 approval logic. You're just filling in the gaps in terms of what AI needs to know. And then you have some governance data here. Last but not least, we have our Raci. So let's take these two pieces. First piece we'll copy and paste into the Aimpm Project Management Coach. And there's one more piece that I'm going to need to add here, which is the Raci. So I'll type in here is the Raci. And again, this is one example of how you can add this information in. You can definitely add in a fuller, more complete document if you have that, right? So a lot of times Racis are drafted out into Excel documents, but again, we're using very minimal data here for the sake of demonstration. So I'm going to copy this. I'm also going to paste this in. All right, and I'm going to hit go. And let's see what AI can produce. Now, essentially what it's going to try to do is fill in all of these gaps in terms of the roles. It may even change up some of these tasks based on what we've prompted it to do. All right, so let's take a look here. It starts to break out the updated Raci matrix here. Okay. Now, it didn't fill in all of the gaps, but it is changing up some of the roles here based on the information that we gave it. Now, we're going to do a little trick here because one of our objectives, even though we didn't really state it within the prompt, was to fill in some of those gaps. So once it's done with this query and this output, we'll go ahead and refine this. All right, now, here's one thing I can do. I can come up here, copy this in, and say fill in the gaps. What AI will do is it'll fill out these gaps according to its best guess. This you may need to validate, right? So you may need to go back to your team and say, hey, I redrafted the Raci matrix. I want to make sure based on the last inputs that we have that all of these roles are accurate. Now, what AI does for us, which is pretty cool, is it starts to bold out the things that were already there and it leaves the information that was added in sort of not bold, right? So we're seeing that distinction there. Still has everything in terms of our tasks, but I think it switched it up a little bit. So let's take a look at the original stuff we had here. Yeah, it's pretty much the same, but now we have a full Raci matrix broken out for us. We could take this information, update our Raci, and every time that a role changes on your project, you can simply run the same exact query with the updated Raci to get the new information that you need. All right, so let's take a look at everything that it gave us here before we close this out. So it gave us an updated Raci matrix. It updated the table, all right, with all of the different roles and responsibilities that were found out in the scenario. And then it gave us some key adjustments based on the updated context, and then governance ready validation checklist. So just a checklist that we can go through to make sure that we're getting all of these roles correct. Being that we didn't like that the table still had some blanks in it, we asked AI to add in the additional information based on the context that it has. And so the safest role really is an informed role. If we can't define whether or not someone's responsible, accountable, or consulted on something, then probably the best role for them is going to be I, which is informed, which seems to be what AI filled in here. So it is using a degree of logic to make sure that it's putting things in that just need to be verified for the most part. Then some notes on the filled in assignments, right? It gives you information as to why it changed those assignments for you. So if you just had to update your Raci and you just made those changes and then you brought that back to your leadership without justification as to why changes were made or the changes that were made, right? You're not pointing those out. Your Raci matrix can be just as confusing as it was before. So what AI does and what the Aimpm Project Management Coach does is it refines this information in a way that is now digestible, that you can talk to, and actually does have an impact on how things will move forward with your project team. Again, this is the power of AIRTOC, taking a very simple query along with the Raci and refining it to what we actually want, copying and pasting this information in and asking AI to fill in the gaps, which it does here. This entire process may have taken you hours to do, and we just did it in less than 10 minutes. Hopefully this helps you guys out. We're getting ready to move on to the next video. We will see you there.